Welcome back to the Keeping Karlsson Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Ben Burnett. Joining me, your other host, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my friend, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well. Busy night of hockey. Very exciting here on Thursday evening. Hoping to get a little bit of a podcast bump going for some of my players.
When we're talking and you use the word hockey, are you leaning into it because you know we're recorded and you know I'm going to comment on it?
No, it's literally just the way that I talk. Every Canadian I have ever spoken with says that that's how I pronounce things. Soccer, hockey. It's just the way it is.
That's okay. I'm over here saying I'm taking my car to the bar to have, I'm driving real far. But nobody tuned in to think about the way that we talk, Louis. They want to hear us talk about fantasy hockey. So let's jump right into the news and notes that are most important in the fantasy hockey universe this week. I am going to start with a very quick update for Jack Eichel's injury timeline on his neck surgery recovery. Not going to get into too much detail after we did the mega breakdown of the trade last week, but official word from Greg Wyshynski today that Eichel will undergo surgery next week, spend 3 weeks in Denver, and then is hoping to be ready to go in 3 months, which would put him, middle of February, so probably towards the return of the NHL from the Olympic break. Just thought it was worth keeping in mind, but again, we talked about that ad nauseum the other night. So, Louis, I'm going to throw to you for our next story. Give us an injury update on a player near and dear to your heart.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I've got shares of this guy all over the place. No fun to have. Nathan MacKinnon, we have some clarity on his situation. He is going to be gone for 3 weeks, give or take. He suffered a lower body injury during the loss to Columbus, adding injury to insult. Now, the coach said 3 weeks, give or take. If you are a MacKinnon owner, are you hoping for give or take? Which is shorter when you use that phrase?
You're the English teacher. I would defer to my good pal, the English teacher. I wouldn't want to answer that one myself.
I appreciate that you think I teach English. I'm a history teacher here, so this is a little bit out of my area of expertise as well. So I guess we'll have to leave that up. Tweet at us, please, at ShortShiftsKK. Anyway, the result that we have here is line one, power play one, JT Compher. Now, it's great to see a Michigan man getting that deployment, but this is, maybe a bit of a surprise. I think the Kadri owners maybe are a little disappointed here, but, this guy is not widely owned, getting great opportunity. I think this is someone you should be jumping on for a stream, keeping in mind, of course, that Colorado's schedule is nasty. Just a couple games. It just has seemed like it's been an age since we've seen Colorado. They're playing their first game of the week here tonight. And the schedule doesn't get much better down the line. So I think, obviously in a position where he could really cash in and be worth a couple games of a streamer in just one outing. But make sure you're balancing your schedule appropriately.
I mean, I'm all for JT Compher. I said it last, no Kadri rosterers are surprised if they listen to Short Shifts on Tuesday. That's all I'm going to say. Louis, we are going to hop over to an almost ouchery, but now a re-injury to Mike Smith, who has re-injured his leg and was sent back to Edmonton ahead of the Oilers' 4-game road trip. I guess that was today. Mikko Koskinen has been pretty much the workhorse since Smith went down. He has been excellent in his first 8 starts, posted a .920 save percentage. His only really bad start was his last game against the Rangers. And then again tonight, he's got, I think, 15 saves on 18 so far, heading deep into the third. The Oilers did start Stuart Skinner for the first time this season Tuesday against the Red Wings, and he was fine. They lost, but it was not his fault, stopping 35 of 38 shots in a loss. The Oilers, you have to be hoping that they can rely on Skinner to spell Koskinen, who's really struggled with the workhorse workload in the past. And I'm just a little bit nervous looking at the trend lines here. The last game against the Rangers was bad, and then again tonight, the Oilers are turning into a fairly decent defensive team. They're not hanging their goalies out to dry in the way that they used to in previous years. It would be nice to see Mikko Koskinen hold on to that .920. I'm worried that it's going to come back down to earth, but for now, I think he got a hold.
Yeah, I think so too. This is a team that has a very good chance to win every game that they play in. I do think you are letting Skinner off a little bit easy. I don't know if you saw, but he had just a blooper reel giveaway to let Larkin deposit it into a wide open net, trying to play the puck. So goalies, be careful when you're trying to play the puck. You have a lot of responsibility. But yeah, otherwise, I totally agree with you. I think that's a great point. And I know you are someone who is holding Koskinen, and you're getting some nice bonus scoring out of him.
If he doesn't mess it up for me, that's the issue. I am worried about just the trend line here. It's not looking amazing. But Lewis, why don't you tell us about a happier ending to a goalie injury story?
Well, it depends on which side of the goalie story you're on here, because we had very high hopes for Spencer Knight, but I am sure that the Panthers are breathing a sigh of relief that Bobrovsky is coming out of injury. He brings his 6-0 record, 1.72 goals against average, and .948 save percentage back into the Florida crease. This is all obviously pending the results of Thursday night's game. But he's relieving Knight, who really struggled, to the tune of a .792 save percentage and 10 goals against over a pair of back-to-back games early this week. He did have 2 wins in the 2 previous games, so I'm not here to say that Knight is trash and that you should be jettisoning him if he's been useful to you up to this point. But Bob has really yet to struggle, aside from going out with injury. So the goalie hierarchy, seems to have shaken itself out in Sunrise for the time being, at least until Bob struggles, which would be for the first time this season. He's looked pretty sharp so far in this game against the Penguins. I know one of the goals he gave up was on a breakaway. Those things will happen.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely, I'd be nervous about Bob in a season-long conversation. I don't know if he's somebody who can do what he's been doing for the first 8 games of this year, over 82. But I definitely do want to kind of tease apart the conversation about Spencer Knight, who I think, if you were holding him earlier in the year, it's because you were thinking of him as an extremely safe handcuff in Florida. If Bob ever does go down, the thought was Spencer Knight is going to take that net and run with it. And I think that the nerve-wracking part about potentially dropping Knight in that scenario is that if you drop him, somebody else is probably going to jump right away on him. Hopefully, now that he's had a couple of blow-up performances, either the Panthers realize that he needs to get some more work down in the AHL, which might be possible, or it kind of throws off your opponent. So in the future, if Knight does pick up a start or 2 in a row, you might be able to sort of sneak in and grab him a little bit lower profile than he was to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Some good strategic opportunity here if you are paying close attention and working with your lineup just the way that you need it to be. Unfortunately, another common theme of our show here is spending time discussing COVID situations. We've got a pretty rough one out in Canada's capital. Ben, will you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so in Ottawa, we've got 9 players now. Nikita Zaitsev, the most recent addition earlier this evening, and an assistant coach on the COVID protocol for the Senators. Those players include Matt Murray, Connor Brown, Alex Formanton. And it's probably, they're playing the Los Angeles Kings tonight, probably about as easy a matchup as there is out there. So if you're choosing between streaming options over the next few days, if Ottawa doesn't start to get some of its players back, you might be wanting to just pick up whoever is playing against the Ottawa Senators over the next few days. There are a few fantasy implications here. Line 1, Zach Sanford is now a thing in Ottawa. He took Batherson's spot even before the COVID protocol issues hit Ottawa. I presume they're trying to sort of give that second line a boost with this, but Sanford's been pretty okay so far. A goal and 4 shots in his first game on that spot. And Philip Gustafson has been kind of decent in the Ottawa net this year. A 9-11 across his first 5 starts. He has the start again tonight and looks to be putting up a fairly decent performance. If you're desperate for games started, there are worse options, I would say.
I agree with you. I would say if you are in a position where you're going for wins, this may not be the ideal opportunity. They did put up a fair number of shots tonight against the Kings with that game in its closing time here, but not a whole lot of real offense to show for it. So I don't know if you're going to be expecting much in the wins department, but if you need volume, I think that could certainly be a useful add.
Agreed. Yeah, that's a good rate stat start.
All right, one other area where we're seeing a little bit of trouble is in Dallas. After a 3-2 loss to Nashville, it seems like Rick Bowness may be in a bit of trouble. Maybe just an overreaction to the frosty way he treated the media, but there was a players-only meeting after the game. Bowness did not participate. He did speak with the media for nearly 30 seconds and was confrontational, perhaps. He seems, he said, we know what we have to do and we need to fix it. But he also said, I'm not in the room. It was kind of a mess of a statement, that's made it seem as if he was really out of the loop. So, there was a bright spot in that Rupe Hintz broke through with a couple goals in that game, but they weren't able to pull out the win. And it may be the case, that Bowness's time is limited over in Dallas. If he ends up on the outs, it's possible that we could see a coaching change that might provide an offensive bump. I'm no coaching expert in terms of how it impacts the game, on a shift by shift basis, but most of what I'm hearing from the people who do know about those things and are very smart, is that you could see the offense unleashed a little bit under a new coach.
I mean, there's smoke. I don't know if there's fire, right? At this point, it seems like a bit more of an optic mess than anything to have Bowness go out there and seem agitated in front of the cameras. But maybe, maybe he's just having a rough day. He got a bad text when he came off the, we don't know yet. I just don't want to jump to any conclusions and assume that we're like, let's go grab all the Dallas Stars we can possibly find because maybe they're going to see a coaching change that could not happen.
Yeah, agitated. I like that description.
Sure. Lewis, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, you are going to hear about a couple of streaky players. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Lewis, why don't you take us to our first streaker of the evening?
All right, well, we need to head over and talk about this bizarre situation on the blue line in Arizona, where you've got Shane Gostisbehere and Jacob Chychrun. Gostisbehere just totally overperforming and Chychrun underperforming, and a lot of people are trying to figure out what do we do in this case. So Gostisbehere has a 72% even strength points participation. This is 24% higher than his career best. That means when goals are being scored on the ice, he is getting in on them 24% more often than he has ever before. Maybe this is a function of him being the best puck mover who's out there. Obviously, he's been on teams that have had a little more offensive capability. But it certainly is, at least a full standard deviation above what we sort of have come to expect. He has a 10.5 even strength shooting percentage, which is tied for his career best from 2015-16. The team is shooting 10% when he's on the ice, which is a little high. And 5 of his 6 even strength assists have been secondary assists, which are a little less predictable, and could certainly fade. Meanwhile, he's also getting the fewest offensive zone starts of his career at just 50%. But we have to point out that he has really been on fire. He has been the defenseman, really the player to own in Arizona. So it's been very interesting to sort of, see him emerge with this new opportunity he's had in the desert. Chychrun, on the other hand, actually has a 100% even strength points participation, but that's because they have only scored 1 goal while he was on the ice and he managed a secondary assist on it. He has no goals on 30 shots. The team is shooting a hair under 1% when Chychrun is on the ice. So you have to imagine that there is serious regression coming for both of these players. Ghost regressing in a negative direction, Chychrun regressing in a positive direction. In history class, we talk about international policy in terms of realism and idealism. The realist would look at this and say, I want the player who is getting all of the points. The idealist would say, I believe in the numbers. I'm looking under the hood. I think that Chychrun is the clear option to rebound here. Would you prefer if I am a Gostisbehere owner, should I be offering Ghost in a trade for Chychrun and hoping that those numbers end up paying off?
I mean, I think I would prefer Gostisbehere in a points-only league and Chychrun in a bangers category league at this point, which is, I think, shocking enough to have imagined myself saying a few weeks ago. But overall, I wouldn't be shocked at all if I just prefer Chychrun in a few weeks because the shot rates are still high. You have to imagine he's going to score a couple goals again, and that's not something that I really can feel good about with Gostisbehere. So I would prefer Chychrun. I don't know if I would try that trade offer just because I think you're kind of going to struggle to convince the person who invested draft capital in Chychrun that they should give all that up for a guy you got off the waiver wire who nobody believed in a few weeks ago. I think that there's still some market disbelief in Gostisbehere. I don't think people are ready to buy in, so I think it might be difficult to kind of cash that earning back in a trade.
Sure. So I guess what I would say is if you can sell him, I think I might recommend doing so because the new numbers do suggest things are going to slow down for him a little bit. But if you can't overcome those psychological hangups, the least you can do is kind of enjoy the ride while it lasts. But be aware that it may come crashing to a conclusion here, maybe sooner rather than later.
So do you think that Gostisbehere is do you believe in him at all? Do you think he's like a worthwhile option rest of season? Are you just streaming him at this point? Kind of where do you land now?
So I mean, I am holding him. I had the choice to drop him or Clayton Keller, and I ditched Keller because I think that it seems to me that Ghost is someone who the offense is moving through in Arizona. You know, like I said before, it seems like he is someone that they are trusting to handle the puck, and I like that side of it. You know, obviously you're riding some unsustainable numbers, but you don't hear the Troy Terry people complaining. And, you know, I like having a defenseman down on my list here that can provide, you know, an assist every other game or put up some shots. So until things really slow down for him, I'm holding. I don't think I'm going to be able to trade him in the cupful, but
I guess my question, though, Lewis, and I think you maybe got to it at the end there, is I'm wondering what you think he can do rest of season. Like, do you think he's a 60-point defenseman, or like you said, you know, an assist every other game? Do you think he's more of a 40-point guy?
Maybe split the difference, like 45 to 50, just because I'm not a big believer in the offense. And if his points participation is falling and they, you know, are not scoring a ton of goals, I think that really does limit his upside. But, you know, I think that they're, you know, in a league like ours, I think there is room for a 45, 50-point defenseman.
Oh, definitely. I definitely agree with you there, and I think that's a good point. That you're keeping your eye on it at this point. You're holding on to him in deeper leagues because it's unlikely you're going to find a top power play defenseman who shoots pretty well at this point, right? Like that was kind of the knock on Gostisbehere, was that there was nothing going on in the back categories. So I definitely don't mind holding GB at this point.
All right, why don't you take us down to the Windy City and tell us about another streak?
All right. Well, we wanted to talk next about Kirby Dach, who so far in a line one, what I would call an audition in Chicago, playing between Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat, getting mountains of minutes, played 25 in his last game and has been 19 plus in 6 of his last 8. Has just 1 goal and 1 assist in his past 10 games, just 6 points in 14 games for Kirby. Don't call me Nintendo mascot Doc. My thought process on Doc is that it's kind of a bummer if you held on to him through this week, because this week is the bad schedule. You know, you kind of want to drop him on Monday so that you don't have to deal with his 2 games through this week. He has 3 next week, so you're starting to think, okay, well, do I really want to drop a guy playing line one with Kane and DeBrincat, a guy like Kirby Dach who has this pedigree? And I have to say, I'm not quite ready to give up on Dach just yet. I think that better days will come for him, and I think that we could be seeing, you know, a young player coming off some injuries. It could just take him a little while to get going. So I'm not saying I'm holding him in shallow leagues or even every deep league, but if you're in a league where you're kind of maybe you're cruising, you're 4-0 or 3-1, and you have a little bit of time to see what he could become, I might be holding on to Kirby Dach for a few more games.
Yeah, I think he's the kind of guy who could definitely even out for you a little bit. You know, he's still shooting reasonably well. He's playing between great players. He's getting monster minutes. If you have the ability to remain patient with him, I think that would be to your benefit.
All right, Lewis, why don't you tell us about our last streaker of the evening?
All right, well, one guy who has been getting some primo deploymento, as our buddy Cousin Dave from the NHL Scream Scheme would say, is Jordan Eberle in Seattle, to the extent that you can get prime deployment in Seattle. But he's got 7 goals in his last 7 games, including a hat trick against the Sabres on 21 shots. he obviously won't maintain this shooting pace. His overall shooting percentage for the season is a more reasonable, but still too high, 20%, considering that his all-situation shooting percentage for his career, is a nice above 10%, but obviously not up close to 20%. So he's likely to regress. I have Eberle shares in a couple spots. I don't think the goals are going to keep coming at that same rate. You can't play the Sabres every game. But he's likely to see some improvement in assists, of which he has only one. And his teammates have been providing very little in terms of scoring on their own for him to assist on. So he's got decent points participation, but it's because he is scoring the goals when they are on the ice. And if it's not him scoring, it's really not anyone. We did see some looks earlier on that showed him lining up with McCann. That's not how they're rolling out here on Thursday, but those lines have been in a blender pretty much all season. So maybe if those two get paired together a little bit and McCann will take some of those shots, maybe he can, even if his shooting cools down, he can get on some assists when his line mates score. But this is a guy who's, taking advantage of this new opportunity that he has. And available in a number of leagues. So if he's hanging around, you might think about jumping on him. Yahoo shows him as rostered in 34% of leagues. And I think that is too low for a guy getting as nice of deployment as he is on Line 1, Power Play 1 in Seattle.
I think that's a great point, Lewis. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in to another Short Shifts. And Lewis, thank you once again for joining me. Why don't you walk us out of here?
All right. Happy to do so. And thank you for joining me for another show. As always, it has been a blast. Thank you, everyone out there, for joining us. Please give us a follow on Twitter at ShortShiftsKK. Brian and Elon at Keeping Carlson. Dave Betton of Stream Scheme at NHL Stream Scheme. They've also got a whole bunch of other handles that they're working with. Game Day Lines, Game Day Goalies, Game Day News. Check all of these out. They're really fun. You can find everything that you may need at cacupful.com to find where everyone's at on social media. Please visit the great sites where we research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.